Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 12 of the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White, and today's guest is Dr. Phillip Moulds. Phillip has been the headmaster of the Rockhampton Grammar School since 2010. Phillip is passionate about educating students to be the best people they can be, the development of leadership within schools, governance, students, teachers, school leaders, teaching and learning, global education, and school-based change. Before joining the Rockhampton Grammar School, Phillip had worked at Brisbane Grammar School for 18 and a half years. Brisbane, by the way, for those outside of Australia, is the city that I'm based in as well, here in Queensland in Australia. At Brisbane Grammar School, Phillip held a variety of positions, including Deputy Headmaster, Deputy Head of Boarding, Head of Science, and Head of Chemistry. Also, for 14 years, Phillip worked as a lecturer for the Graduate School of Education at Harvard University online in the areas of educational leadership and using data to inform learning. Phillip earned his PhD in education from the University of Queensland, investigating the planning, teaching, and assessment of higher order thinking processes and dispositions. Phillip also possesses a Bachelor of Educational Studies with first class honours, postgraduate diploma of education, Bachelor of Science, and Bachelor of Music, all from the University of Queensland. Phillip has been a member of the ISQ board for the past 5 years, which is Independent Schools Queensland, and has been the chair of the Education Subcommittee for the past 4 years. He is a graduate of the AICD Directors Course and has served on the Anglicare Central Queensland Board and the board of the Australian Boarding Schools Association. Welcome, Dr. Phillip Moulds.
How are you, Jono? It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I jumped straight into it saying a fellow Queenslander, and I think the question that no one in the world apart from those in Queensland and New South Wales really care about, but seeing as I know there will be a fair few, who do you go for in the state of origin? Are you a Queenslander or do you go for New South Wales?
Given that I grew up in New South Wales and its state of origin in terms of rugby league, I still go for New South Wales, but back the Reds in rugby union.
Oh, okay. I love that. I always love it's one of those questions where it always brings really interesting answers. If people are listening from outside of Australia and you've never heard of the State of Origin, look it up. It's definitely one of the biggest sporting events over here in Australia. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation about leadership. And let's jump straight into it. I would love to hear, and I'm sure the listeners would love to hear as well, your story. The story of how you became the leader that you are today. And you can feel free to go back as far as you want. And just to share, particularly, I guess I'm interested in some of those moments along the way that really shaped you becoming the leader that you are today, Phillip. So yeah, tell us your story.
Look, I grew up in country New South Wales, and it was a lovely place to grow up. Inverell's a town of about 10,000 people. Inverell High School was a small high school in regional New South Wales where you got to know a lot of different people from a variety of backgrounds, and people went to a variety of places. When I finished school, I was lucky enough to get into the University of Queensland, and throughout your leadership journey, whether it be during your time at school, whether it be your time following school in some study, or whether it be in employment, I think leadership's really shaped by the people that you work with, the people that you interact with, and the people who influence you. And I've been really lucky throughout all of my life to have had some great influences, whether it be from mum and dad. Mum was a primary and infants teacher, ended her career as a head of infants. Both my uncle and my aunt on both sides, on mum's side of the family, were teachers. So I was sort of in a family of teachers anyway, so education was a little bit in the blood. I've always had a great passion and love for learning, and I think that's something that's also shaped my leadership journey. I've never sort of stood still. I've always wanted to know more and been really inquisitive, and I think in terms of enabling leadership of others, that's one of those attitudes and behaviours that we really need to inculcate in all those around us. I've also been really fortunate to have a variety of different people who've really influenced me as we've gone through. My first teaching position, I was lucky enough to get a job at Brisbane Grammar School. For those who are listening who don't know Brisbane Grammar School, it's probably the leading academic school in Queensland. And when I was employed there as a first-year out teacher, there weren't very many first-year out teachers getting jobs at a school like that. So I was very lucky to be employed majorly as a science teacher, and there was me, and then I think the next oldest member of staff was 20 years older than what I was within that staff room.
Wow.
And I was just so lucky to have people like David Betts, who was the head of department at that stage, David Bryant, who was a another chemistry teacher, who were poles apart in terms of personality and approach.
Yeah.
But at their centre of being was their love for students and their passion for growth and development and learning. And they approached it in a variety of different ways, but it gave you a great role model, a great set of role models and a great set of experiences that you could build upon your own self and your own understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was lucky enough to also had the headmaster at that time was Peter Lennox, and the deputy which went through there, who then became headmaster, Brian Short, provided me with great opportunities to try different things. It was a great space where, in terms of leadership, you could take risks and fail, but fail forward and learn from that, and go and look for better things going forward. I was also really lucky to have had networks going all the way through, whether that was at University of Queensland or whether that was at Brisbane Grammar School or at Rockhampton Grammar School, where you can lean on work with other people to help you get better.
Yes.
My work through the Harvard Graduate School of Education wide world, where I was there for 14 years, finished in about 2016, was a great time in terms of getting a different world view about education and how things marry together throughout the world. Working with Art Costa and implementing Habits of Mind, Brisbane Grammar School, in terms of developing attitudes, behaviours and links. Going through at Rockhampton Grammar School and transforming the culture and learning so that it became the forefront about how students were metacognitive about their approach is also something that I've been really privileged to be a part of. And I suppose the core part of that being is that I've been really committed to working and learning at work.
Yes.
So part of my learning journey has been really learning as a part of a team, being able to work collaboratively with people, but having the primary side of my learning being my everyday work. And I think in terms of our leadership, the more we can focus people's learning on what they're doing from day in, day out, and make that the centre of their learning journey, the greater leverage we get from the whole package.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to chat about learning, actually, because I've had quite a few educational leaders on the podcast, and schools is the biggest sector that we work with at Clarity. But I feel like working with schools and working with the education sector and talking about learning are sometimes two slightly different things. And I think it's going to be fantastic today to mix the two and really dive deep into. I know there'll be a lot of teachers listening, and I have a bunch of really close friends and people in my network who are amazing teachers, and those who are coming up through the ranks, and they're thinking they want to go and explore teaching. So I think that's going to be a fantastic conversation. Before we talk about that, as you look back on your journey to get to where you are today, leading the Rockhampton Grammar School, what moments in particular come to mind as you reflect on that journey? Are there any that really you think back to, yeah, that's right, when that happened, when I made that mistake, but I learned from it, or when I saw that leader interact in that way during that circumstance? Are there any moments in particular that you look back on as moments that really shaped you becoming the leader that you are today?
I think when you reflect, there are always those moments, and there are those moments that have been really positive and have really encouraged you to do certain things. And there's always those moments in people's careers where you think, oh, I really didn't like that very much. I'll never do that again. So I think probably it's not necessarily a moment, but it's a period of time. When I was head of science, and David Betts, who I worked with for many, many years, was the Dean of Studies. My work with him in terms of working out what the best process was to enable pedagogy and to enable students to learn was seminal in my development, because that's a question that you ask yourself when you're working with anybody who you're employed with.
Yes.
Within education, you want the best for your students, you want the best for your staff, and you want that partnership to work really well with the parents as well. And when you're working with anybody within a business, you also want that to be a learning organisation and how to work best with them within a particular context at a particular time.
Yes.
And I suppose the thing that really hits me at the heart of that conversation and that time with David is, I suppose we're applying what I'd call the Lachlan and Claire test. So I've got two children. I've got Lachlan, who's now currently 20, and Claire, who's currently 17 and in year 12 at my school.
Yeah.
And the Lachlan and Claire test goes along the lines of, you'd want every student at your school to experience what you'd want your own children to experience. And if you apply that test to anything that you're going about, I think that gives you a fair measure about what you want your workspace to be like. So if you take yourself outside of education and you go to the business world, you want for every employee what you'd want your own children to experience within their employment.
Yeah.
And if you use that as a driving factor, I think that creates a certain culture and creates a certain set of expectations that drives a place forward from a place of heart and a place of value.
Yeah, I love that. It's I've never thought of it exactly that way before. I love the Lachlan and Claire test. I think particularly for education, but it is a universal principle. One of the things that I ask leaders in coaching a lot, which was a question I heard someone say, ages ago when they were talking about what they ask themselves when they're when they're leading through a challenging situation. They would ask, what would a great leader do? And I always thought, and then I tried asking myself that, and I found it gave me all sorts of different perspectives. But what I love about the Lachlan and Claire test is that you take that to another level, because I think that it's so funny how we're wired, how just asking that would open up all different ways of thinking about it. And I love that. That's really profound.
And I suppose the other thing in terms of experiences that you learn from another guiding principle is you cannot not influence. So, there's certain times during everyone's career, I think, that you've let something go, but on hindsight, you really wish you hadn't let go.
Yes.
Because people will take that as either tacit approval or that you haven't cared enough about to engage with that particular point. So I think the other thing that I've really learned is whatever you do or you do not do, you have an influence not only on how you're perceived by others, but on what you stand for and what you support and what you don't support.
Yes, yeah, I think that's. I agree. It's that idea of culture is not just what you create, but I know there's a really poignant way to say it. I can't remember what it is, but that idea that culture isn't just what you create; it's what you're willing to walk past. It's what you tolerate. And that I remember hearing that for the first time, and for me, that was a real aha moment of, oh yeah, of course. That's it's the things that you tolerate and don't address that's also having an influence. So when it comes to education, I guess there's so many different ways I want to approach this, because I just feel like your perspective on education, particularly for those listeners who are educators or want to be, are moving towards that space, might be young leaders who really want to lead in education, is going to be really valuable. But let's start with, say you've got a teacher who is in a position where they're teaching, and they're probably listening to this, which is maybe a sign that they are passionate about leadership if they're listening to the Leadership Conversations podcast. But there's something in them that goes, I want to lead in education. What would your advice be to someone, it could be young or old, who is in education as a teacher, but they're looking at the leadership, and there's something about it where they're going, I really want to be a leader in the education space. What advice would you give them as you look back on your journey so far?
I think the first piece of advice I'd give them is to realise that you don't need a formal position or a title to be a leader in education.
Yeah, great.
That it's really important that all of us realise that we're there to teach children. And that whilst that while that's simple, it's also of fundamental importance to all of our educational practice. We need to make sure that we're creating positive relationships with our students, with our staff, with the parents that we work with, and that we're focusing on their learning. That we want all of our people that we work with to be not only successful and achieve their personal best in terms of what they're doing at their school, but we also want them to grow, to become adults and people who live really rich and fulfilling lives.
Yes.
And that we're creating people who set really high goals for themselves and pursue those with passion, but also understand that they have a responsibility to use what they've learnt not only as an end to themselves, but also use them for the benefit and service of others. And I think if you wrap those things together as central constructs within leadership, you can then lead, whether it's a small part of your own educational community, whether it be a department, whether it be a sub-school, a whole school, or importantly within educational networks, whether it be with the Australian College of Educational Leaders or a part of Independent Schools Queensland or a variety of other institutions out there. There are many different ways to think about leadership, but if we keep students at the centre and positive relationships at the centre, it enables us to do wonderful things.
Yeah, that's so true. When it comes to education, what and I know we mentioned this before we came on the podcast, that's something that you're passionate about, so I really want to ask you about this. What makes a good teacher, in your opinion?
I think there's probably a number of things that really characterise a good teacher. And an assembly I did a few years ago, I asked all the students to close their eyes and think about a great teacher they've had, and then try to summarise that within one word. And overwhelmingly, that word from the kids actually happened to be care.
Yeah.
So, good teachers actually really care. They also teach kids content, but at the core of their practice is their care for the children that they have.
Yes.
Great teachers are people with special talents. They spend time to get to know each and every student in their classrooms. They understand what makes them tick, and they understand that they've all got different abilities and goals and passions, and work with them in those sort of areas. Really good teachers also purposefully build those relationships in the classroom, not only with the students, but also with the parents and with other staff, because teaching is a collaborative effort overall. And it's really important, I think, because, as schools and as a society, we need really, really good teachers.
Yes.
Because, teachers fundamentally impact upon students' learning. They fundamentally impact upon performance, and they fundamentally impact on the sort of people we have leaving schools. There are schools who can really develop really great academic kids.
Yep.
But we need to make sure that we're producing great people as well as really good academics, whether that is going off to do an apprenticeship or a trade pathway, or they're looking for university. We really need them to be really good people. We need them to be really engaged within society and giving back to their community, as well as developing their own skills and gifts. And good teachers allow that to happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. If there was a teacher listening and they're going, I want to be that teacher. I want to be that teacher where kids think, who's a great teacher, and they think of this person. What could a teacher do to? I'm interested not only just to care more, but maybe it's not just that. I guess you'd be able to unpack this. How do you help kids know that you care? How do you really communicate? What is it that you think a really great teacher does? And I know you've unpacked some of this in your last answer, but what is it that those really great teachers do where kids go, they care about me? How do they do that?
I think part of it is they spend time with them, Jono, and spend real time. I think also they build up hope in their students. So I think hope's an underestimated quality that many of our youth need for today looking forward.
Yeah.
They develop self-belief within those students, and they develop a respect. I think there's a difference between students knowing teachers care and students seeing teachers as friends.
Yes.
And I think that's a really clear and important distinction to make. Teachers need to be there to develop self-awareness, resilience, self-belief and hope, but they don't have to be the student's best friend. They've got to be there as the guide, as the coach, as the mentor, and someone who they respect and who they connect with. But there also needs to be a professional boundary involved within those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you found helpful in? I imagine that can be, whenever you've got any sort of relationship, we've got that professional relationship. Those sort of lines must be like how to care, how to show concern, but also not have this need to be a friend. My experience is that when teachers have that, it's actually has the reverse effect. When it's that, that there's a bit of a neediness to be liked. I feel like kids pick up on that so quickly. How do you? Is there anything? I'm just thinking, like, to get inside your head as an educator. Is there anything that you found helpful to really do that balance well in terms of really caring and really spending time, but also that professional element and not having that just not needing to be the friend?
I think part of it's having a really good work-life balance yourself.
Yeah.
And recognising that you need to be there for all the students within your class. I've always found doing things outside of the classroom with students really helps develop that relationship. For example, coaching a sporting team, taking a music group, all those things sort of add to the students understand that you see them as a person, rather than as a number sitting in a class. And it is about being really aware of where those boundaries are. It's a really hard thing to describe, but it's a matter of being mindful of yourself about asking probably that Lachlan Clare question: is this relationship one that is appropriate for an adult and a student, or am I crossing over into more of a sort of a mate's territory, which as a teacher I probably need to make sure I don't get too close to?
Yeah, it's true. It's another good way to use that filter, isn't it? How would you want a teacher to interact with your kids? Well, you'd want them to be so supportive and professional. Yeah, that's it's such a helpful filter. I think I'm going to be using that in other areas of leadership, to tell you the truth. It's just brilliant. I'm have to stay on track and not get thinking too much about how to use that, because I love ideas like that. It's just so helpful. So for someone who is stepping into the workforce today, I'm actually working with a school, and one of the things we were chatting about doing was having a panel of teachers to work with the leadership team and actually sit down with the leadership team and say, and do a bit of a focus group market research and say, okay, some of the members of the leadership team, it's a larger school, and they know they want to get their heads back into really what it's like to be a teacher, because they were just saying that they sense that particularly those coming into the workforce now, there's some elements of struggles which this particular leadership team, I know they were just saying, we really want to understand it better, and there's some element of that they're struggling to understand, because it feels like maybe education has changed over the years in some ways. Anyway, I just say that I share that story just because I know it's something that leaders in the education space are aware of and are scratching their head at times with going, how do we really raise up, develop, invest in our teachers, and with our young leaders who are coming through. So what advice would you give, I guess, on the other side of that, which is the teachers that are coming through? What advice would you give someone who is stepping into the workforce for the first time as a teacher in 2021, or if people are listening down the track in future years, what advice would you give to someone?
The first piece of advice I'd give to them is, as we spoke about before, really focus on teaching the kids. Because they're at the centre of your practice and centre of why you are there. Schools are about people who are there. They're not about the bricks and mortar. They're not about the glass and timber of some really impressive school buildings around the country. They're actually about the people who are in the school. So invest time in your relationships with the students and invest time in the relationship with your colleagues, because they're your best source of learning, of support, of being able to really celebrate the great times, and also being supportive when things aren't going quite as well. The second piece of advice I think I'd give somebody entering the workforce is not to be caught in what I'd call the Instagram trap.
Yeah.
So the people share some amazing things around the world about what they're doing, and they're little snippets of things that have gone really well. The teaching journey is not going to be 100% like that.
Yeah.
We have students in schools at the moment who get caught in the Instagram chat thinking their whole world should be like this person who's posted something up there, a little snippet, and that should be their entire life.
Yeah.
I think we need to ensure that we're developing a real picture and that we're being really resilient going forward if we enter into that workspace.
Yes.
I think the other thing I'd encourage them to be is maintain that idea of hope and flexibility going forward. We've probably gone through in the last 18 months 5 or 6 years worth of learning in education crammed into that time, forced on by COVID.
True.
We would have gone through the technology we've gone at the Rockhampton Grammar School. We probably would have spaced that journey over 2 to 3 years instead of 2 to 3 months in terms of online learning that we did last year. And I think if you're entering the workforce now, you need to be mindful of the fact that we have been absolutely in the last 18 months going through such rapid change that we're going to need some consolidation time going forward to bed everything down and work out really what does the future look like and hold for us. I'd also encourage them to be all that they can be, to set really high goals, both for themselves and for their teaching, and to pursue that with passion, to understand that no matter how they try, they'll have failures, and if they're going to have failures, they're not something to be feared, and the key to success will actually be their ability to bounce back from that and to be resilient in faces of those. And I suppose finally, I'd really encourage them to look after themselves, use their colleagues for support, learn from them, and really enjoy their classroom and celebrate what it actually means to be a teacher, because it is really a calling, a passion, and a conviction.
Yeah, I love that. It's so simple, but it's actually very profound to where you started, which is to focus on the kids that you're teaching, and I love that because I think purpose and meaning is so important in our roles, and keeping and the purpose and meaning in teaching is in it's about the kids. That's what it's about. That's why schools exist. It's not about the buildings. Yeah, that's great advice. What about for educational leaders, people in your role, or people in sort of deputy roles or heads of department who are looking at these young leaders coming through, maybe watching some of the burnout or some of the stats around teachers, only teaching for a number of years before they leave. I think this is a question educational leaders I've talked with, particularly those who aren't necessarily in the sort of headmaster, head teacher, head of school role yet, are saying, I just don't really know, how do you balance really caring for your people and leading them well when there is an element where it is like you said, it's a calling, right? There's a sacrifice to like doing anything really worthwhile. what advice would you give to other leaders around leading, particularly young teachers, and doing that really well?
Well, I think at the centre of it is, we've talked about student welfare, but staff welfare is really a key foundation in leading any school community. We need to value respect and foster it, really celebrate diversity, and encourage everyone to pursue their personal best, but also be there to support each other, to be kind to each other, to be generative, and really to have that growth mindset looking forward. I think we've also got to provide time and support for each other, because what happens at school is not only a manifestation about what's happening at schools, but it's also a manifestation about what's happening in people's lives. And,
yes.
Life is messy, and we're all humans, and we all make mistakes. So as school leaders, we need to be able to recognise that fact, provide a supportive environment for people when they're going through tough times, but also be there to encourage them and develop further. I spoke earlier about learning at work. I think the more opportunity we can provide our staff to learn, develop, and to grow, the better we are. We run a leadership program at school, and we've run it for the last 5 or 6 years, where we have 14 members of staff apply and do a 12-month program consisting of 6 days intensive professional development with a leadership project involved. And the important part about that program is that the 14 people who are involved each year are not just teachers. So we might have a member of the leadership team, we'll have a couple from the middle management area, we'll have some teachers from the learning primary, secondary school, we'll have some administration staff. So that there's a joining of minds and a sharing of experience across groups that don't generally happen within a school environment. So we have the registrar being able to talk to the primary teacher, being able to talk to the director of marketing and development at the school. We have the ability for people to share their perceptions and use that to grow and develop further what they see as the community within the school. And I think the other important part about that is it provides us with a shared language to talk about leadership within the school.
That's right.
Being able to equip your staff to be able to talk about leadership with a shared language, a shared vision, and a shared set of understandings is really, really important, because that enables them to engage in those behaviours and those attitudes to drive that further forward.
That's I think that's brilliant, and I think there's so much more that leaders can do really intentionally to create pathways. Anything you can do to create a pathway, anything. I think we often underestimate how the smallest things that is a time, energy, and thoughtful investment by leadership in our people, in professional development, that says anything that says we want to invest in you. You aren't just a teacher, but you aren't just an administration staff. You're not just the director of marketing. We actually want to invest in you, in your leadership, in your professional development. Anything we can do that says that is I feel like it has such high ROI, and ROR, that return on relationship, because it's nothing like feeling like an organization and the leadership really invest in you. Something you said earlier that really sort of piqued my interest, and I can't help but come back to it, was about this idea of consolidation. And I feel like that's going to be such a big thing for leaders to learn, particularly those who are, we're all going through COVID, is what does it look like to do change? And sometimes we don't think of consolidation as part of the overall change process. How do you see, I guess, what does it look like for you to do change really well? And as you look really practically at some of those 2 to 3 months instead of 2 to 3 years changes you've made it at Rockhampton Grammar, what are some of the ways that you think leaders can think about consolidation? Like, how do we do that? How are you thinking about it?
I find, look, to start with, I'll admit I find consolidation really difficult because I like change and I like moving forward, but consolidation is really, really important in terms of having everybody along the journey with you. And
Yes.
I think it's really important in any change process to ensure that you've developed that why, that understanding of, well, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And to have a critical mass of people along for the journey with you. You know, if we're being real, in every school setting, there are always a couple of staff who are quite cynical about any change process because change is hard. And as human beings, we don't necessarily want to keep on changing and keep on developing when we know what we're doing works really, really well. But if you don't change, people catch up with you. So you want to make sure that you're always getting better. And consolidate. So as part of the change process, which had to deal with online learning here, we really did engage the teachers in thinking about, well, how are we going to set it up? How are we going to move forward? And what are some exemplars of best practice from you that you can share with the rest of the school to enable us to all learn and move forward? So it was really important for us, not for the leadership team to be the font of all knowledge, but really to be those who had some structures, some ideas to talk about with the staff, but also to engage the staff in, well, what does this really look like on the ground? How is this really going to work with you? And what are some questions that we really need to ask to come up with the best solutions? And for there not to be anything that would immediately shut down, so that we can look at it and wonder about it and consider. So, for example, one of the interesting discussions we had was in the secondary school, our subjects run for 6 periods a week. And we were looking at it, and the simple solution would have been to run all those 6 lessons online with the teacher sitting in the classroom broadcasting to their students. We took a different approach after lots of discussion and consideration about running 4 of those lessons online, but also giving 2 lessons back to the students as independent learning opportunities within that subject area. Because that allowed us to fundamentally change what the pedagogy was to suit that blended environment between online learning and provision and independent learning, which was both synchronous and asynchronous. And that came through a lot of discussion and consideration rather than just jumping to the first immediate solution. I think that's where consolidation does provide us with an opportunity saying, well, we've done that, we look back from it. If we went back to that again, how would that change? Or how would that stay the same for us to leverage and get better and better? Because sometimes change can be about a big shift. So in Queensland, we've undergone a change within Year 11 and 12 assessment, which was a big shift. But it could be little shifts across 100 different things that by making those little shifts, you actually make a big impact. So it's about thinking about both of those, and I think consolidation is important in terms of finding out what those little improvements are that can make a big impact when combined together.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's a great answer. And what I hear about how you did that process with your with the wider team is that you allowed them to weigh in and legitimately. And I love a phrase by Patrick Lencioni that people will only buy in if they've weighed in. Like you have to have, there has to be involvement, or one of my favorite books, Blue Ocean Strategy, talks about engagement and then explanation and expectations. And so I love how you said up front, look, there are always going to be people who disagree, and there's always going to be people who are unhappy with changes. I think that's one of the things leaders need to realize, is that you're not going to please everyone, but what you can do is you can engage with everyone. You know, you can really engage with every stakeholder. And what I find is when things go the worst, and you know, say I'm coming in to work with a team where there's really things have really fallen apart, what you usually find is there was a lack of engagement. And there was it's another thing I love from this book, Blue Ocean Strategy. They talk about this idea, like we have in the legal system, due process. They talk about this idea of fair process, that your people want, all they want, and it's like it brings me back to the Lachlan and Claire test. I love that. All they want is fair process. They just want just make it a fair process. And so even if you're going to choose something that I disagree with, if I've had the chance to weigh in about it, if you've then explained it to me and said, hey, some people, we know that this is what we're doing and we know not everyone agreed with this. This is why we're doing it this way. I feel like that even if I'm going to disagree with that, even if it's a real deal breaker for me, I'm in such a better place, and you really do take away so much of the tension that really leads to a lot of chaos if you engage with people, explain it, and just take people through a fair process and then set really clear expectations. And so I loved your thoughts there about consolidation. That's really brilliant.
The only other thing I'd probably add to those thoughts, Jono, is that sometimes as leaders, we need to take the time to allow people to do things and not see it from our perspective as, oh, I'm imposing or giving them more work. Sometimes you need to give those people that opportunity to develop their skills and develop their abilities, rather than you seeing as an imposition onto them.
Yes. Yeah.
I think there's a number of times where you think, well, I could give it to person X, but I know I can do it in half the time. So therefore, I'll do it rather than put that impost upon them. And you're actually denying them that opportunity to do that. And you can actually use your own time almost as an apprenticeship type thing to help them develop their abilities, so that when something else similar comes along, they're able to do that into the future.
Yeah, it's I love that, because I just watched a video today around a book. I think it's called 4,000 Weeks. It's one of these. I think that's what it's called. It's a book that sort of looks at. It's a different take on productivity and time management. It's really interesting. I'm still on the fence about some of the thoughts in there, but one of the things they talked about was how efficiency can be the enemy of true productivity. And I thought, no, that's interesting. But you just reminded me of it there, because it's so true when it comes to raising leaders, the biggest opportunities through some of these in a crisis, when it comes to the biggest opportunities, is often involve letting others into the process, giving others the chance to step up, and just generally in leadership, taking something and going, I will choose the extra time, maybe for me as well, because if there's a training, that training someone else to do it, or going alongside them, can actually take more time than doing it yourself, particularly if it's something you've done a lot of. And handing that off might be less efficient organizationally or personally in the short term, but that what you're really investing in is that person's capacity. You're investing in your relationship with them. And it's so true. That's absolutely, and I think it's a different take on looking at what needs to be done. I think it's just a different lens. It's a lens that says, well, who could do this that might not be able to do it as well as I can, but for them this is a great next step, or even a next leap, where if I can really help them and do it, or even do it with them, where this is going to be so helpful for them and such an investment in their leadership. I want to jump over to chat about core beliefs, because this is a topic I'm so passionate about, and I really think one of my reflections, I don't quite know how to unpack it, but it's just an observation at this point, is that it's something I feel like great leaders who really do a great job leading organizations and people, particularly through tough seasons and tough times like COVID. I feel like core beliefs is something, like, in terms of what's really driving them. and the organisation is something that just always seems to pop up. So for you, I'm interested to know what are your sort of core beliefs when it comes to leadership, and how has that shaped your leadership, particularly through this season in the past couple of years?
So, John, I'll talk about my core beliefs in terms of schools,
Yes.
and how I approach it. So I suppose the first belief we've spoken about before, schools are really about the people who are in them. They're about the staff, they're about the students, they're about parents, they're also about our past students, and the communities in which they are a part. And I think you need to be mindful of all of that. Secondly, we've spoken about also student and staff welfare is really a key foundation about everything that we do at schools. We need people to be valued, respected, celebrate diversity, and get everybody pursuing to be the best they can be, realising that different people will be really good at different things. I really believe that schools are first and last student-centred, and that every interaction we have with all of our kids is really, really important. We've really got to have that prime commitment to developing our students as whole people, physically, socially, emotionally, and cognitively, so that they can be really good people as part of our communities.
Yes.
I think effective schools really make learning and the classroom their core business. And the community really is not just an important group of people, but also it's actually an important attitude. It's an important part to building a culture within a school. I think networking and alliances are really important for schools, but they're also really important for people because they give you a different perspective. We use many external people and many different critical friends, because sometimes wherever you work, you get caught up within what you're doing day to day, and it's good to have that outside voice looking at and providing you with different perspectives. I think teachers really are that locomotive of school improvement, and it's really important to get them to thrive and develop with collegiality, with professional honesty, with learning, and really with open communication. I think students are the best and probably most powerful embodiment of actually what a school is, and we need to provide opportunities for them to be heard, and provide, really importantly, opportunities for students to lead, because student leadership is really, really important for the future of our society. I've spoken also about ensuring that you want for everyone at the school and for the school itself what you want for your own children. And if you enable that to be your decision-making process, you inevitably make the right decision in terms of what you're doing with your leadership at school. And finally, you cannot not influence. Whatever you do or you don't do will have an influence on how you're perceived by others, what you stand for, what's permissible, what you support. Modelling and being exemplar is really, really important. And finally, I think you need to be kind to yourself and be kind to others. We can be our own harshest critics, and we need to make sure that we're not critical of others and not critical of ourselves in a way which is unkind, but in a way that's going to really enhance people's growth and development.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful place to land, because I feel like what you've done there is, by articulating those things, it's amazing how many of those things came out in this conversation where I was asking about what would be your biggest piece of advice, and so it's like a lovely summary of some of the things we've talked about. So I just want to thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I'm going to be having aha moments, in 3 days' time. When you have a conversation, and then something there's something in it where you go, particularly the Lachlan and Claire test. How would I want my kids to be led? Because that's challenging. I immediately went to, as a leader, you would always want for your kids or for a family member, you'd always want their leader to be honest with them, but to have their back, and that idea of that sort of feedback, which I think a lot of people find really scary. I went straight there. That's why I love that thought so much. But did you have any sort of last thoughts as we land for listeners?
I suppose just to sum up, we're all looking to be better leaders as we go through. And for me, it's actually about leadership, not about leaders per se, because leadership is about working with others to make the world a better place and to make your school a better place or make your workplace a better place. And by focusing on the collective rather than on the individual, I think we can do great things.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thought to land on. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's also we're in November right now, so I'm really aware. It's a busy time in the school year for a leader such as yourself. So really, I appreciate that, and also thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Jono.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jono White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out John O. White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.